Hey guys, tonight we set sail on a myth wrapped in fog, wine, and just a little dolphin drama. You're drifting across an inky sea where nothing feels quite real, stars blinking like candle wicks above, and something soft sloshing beneath your bare feet. The breeze smells like crushed grapes and salt, and from somewhere behind you, a flute is playing itself. You're about to meet a god who once turned pirates into dolphins, because that's the kind of thing Dionysus does on a casual Tuesday. And if you're thinking this story ends with a wholesome moral, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is over there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink, and it all begins at the edge of Olympus, where storms rumble like jealous gods clearing their throats. Hera, queen of the gods, is absolutely not okay with her husband Zeus's latest romantic misstep, because this time, the affair results in a child. The child is, well, Dionysus, but tonight, you're walking in his grape-stained sandals. You're born from the union of Zeus and the mortal princess Semele. But born is a generous word. Lightning crackles. Hera, in peak soap opera mode, tricks Semele into asking Zeus to reveal his true divine form. He does. She combusts. Like, immediately. You're still a fetus when this all goes down. So Zeus does what any panicked, omnipotent dad would do. He sews you into his thigh. That's right. You gestate inside the king of Olympus's leg until you're ready to be born again. Modern biology could never. When you finally emerge, thunder-backed and squinting, you're already halfway a myth. Zeus knows Hera will be out for your baby blood, so he tucks you away with mortal caretakers in a distant land, usually said to be Mount Nyssa, though historians still argue whether Nyssa was a real place or just an ancient version of somewhere off-grid. There, in the shade of vine-covered trees, you grow up blissfully feral. Your first playthings are wild animals. Your lullabies are the rustling of ivy and the occasional celestial whisper. You're not like the other children. You're a toddler who can already charm panthers and ferment berries into vaguely suspicious juice. At one point, you convince a group of woodland nymphs to raise you, and they're so enchanted that they start wearing grape leaves as accessories, just because it's your thing. And while this all sounds like a Pinterest-worthy cottagecore childhood, Hera's not done hunting. She sends madness, literally, to mess with your brain. You wander. You forget your own name. At one point, you're halfway across the world wearing nothing but a lion pelt and the kind of 1,000-yard stare normally reserved for philosophy majors. Eventually, you start remembering who you are, or at least who you could be. You learn the magic of wine, of transformation, of ecstasy that borders on madness. You become the god of theater, ritual, and rebellion. And yes, you definitely take some creative liberties along the way. One early adventure involves you turning into a lion mid-party, just to prove a point. Another ends with a whole town struck blind because they disrespected your festival playlist. But beneath the glittery madness, there's a thread. You're always protecting outsiders, the outcasts, the theater kids, the weird cousins who collect beetles. Your vibe is chaotic good, but with a warning label. Now, here's your first mainstream historical fact of the night. The cult of Dionysus was real, and it was kind of a big deal in ancient Greece. People would gather in secret groves, wear animal skins, and drink themselves into a holy trance, believing they could merge with your divine presence. These weren't just parties. They were deeply spiritual experiences. Dionysian rites helped break down the rigid hierarchies of Greek society, if only for a night. And here's your fringe tidbit. There are ancient accounts claiming that you once tried to teach winemaking to a group of Indian sages using nothing but humming and tree vibrations. Did it happen? Probably not. Is it weirdly on brand for you? Absolutely. You're not a god of war or logic or lightning. You're a god of, let's see what happens if we unbutton the universe a little. And soon, you're going to test that chaos out on a boat full of pirates who make the world's worst business decision. But not quite yet. Because first, you gather your followers. You travel. You show up in cities where no one expects you, barefoot and smiling like you know something they don't. People are drawn to you, not because you're powerful, though you are, but because you make them feel seen. You don't demand temples with gold. You want singing. Dancing, but maybe a mild transformation into a woodland creature if the mood is right. Historians still debate whether your cult was a response to the increasing rigidity of ancient society or simply a divine way to let humans blow off steam. Either way, you offer something no one else does, freedom with a flicker of danger. The kind that makes you laugh, then gasp, then maybe wake up wearing ivy in your hair and no idea how you got there. And you don't just inspire people, you change them. Quite literally. There's that one time you turned a skeptical king into a serpent. Another time, you convinced a group of maidens to tear their enemies apart in a trance, only to realize too late they were holding someone they loved. And yet, people still follow you. Maybe because you remind them that the world is strange and beautiful and not as solid as it seems. Which brings us to the sea. You're standing on a rocky shoreline, gazing out at a ship anchored nearby. It's not yours, but that doesn't matter. You need to get somewhere, and walking's overrated when you're a god. So you do what anyone in your toga would do. You ask for a ride. The sailors on that ship don't recognize you. To them, you're just some oddly calm young man with a cloak that glows a little too much in the sun. They see no threat. No divinity. Just a potential payday. You smile. Because you already know how this is going to end. But they don't. Not yet. You step onto the ship, sandals barely making a sound against the worn wood, and instantly, the air shifts. Not that the crew notices, too busy sizing you up like you're a goat at market. One pirate whispers, "Royal maybe?" Another guesses, "Temple boy." You're neither, of course. But you say nothing. Just smile. The kind of smile that says you're going to regret this, but I'm too polite to say it out loud. They offer you a seat, loosely translated as, "Sit here so we can figure out how much you'll sell for." It's a bit cramped. The sails sag with the weight of fishy air, and there's an uncomfortable amount of whispering happening behind you. Only one sailor, young, sunburned, and clearly underpaid, glances your way with something like concern. He frowns. "We shouldn't." His voice is low, nearly drowned out by the clatter of ropes. He's not right. I don't know how I know. But that's not a normal man. His name is Acoetes. Remember that. He'll matter later. The captain waves him off. Just a spoiled noble. We'll sell him off before lunch. You rest your chin in your hand and watch the horizon, wondering how long it'll take them to figure it out. You're being polite. For now. But while the pirates plan your fictional ransom, let's rewind just a touch. You didn't accidentally end up on that boat. Everything in your life, every vine-covered grove, every maddened festival, every chorus of drunken followers calling your name, has led you to this moment. Raised by mortals, chased by Hera, and gifted with divine chaos, you've always existed between the lines. You were mortal-born, thigh-birthed, yeah, still weird, and raised in secrecy. The only god who's ever been truly of the people. That's your edge. You understand what it means to be underestimated. And when you were young, you traveled. Not just around Greece, but across Egypt, Phrygia, even India, if the scrolls are to be believed. Each culture added something to your myth. In Egypt, you were Osiris adjacent. In Phrygia, they taught you ecstatic dancing that made later Greeks clutch their pearls. The wine traveled with you, of course. Boys. Fun historical fact. Ancient Greek wine was so strong, They diluted it with up to 3 parts water. Drinking it straight was considered barbaric. You, naturally, encouraged people to do just that, because what's the point of being a god if you can't shatter expectations? And the grapevine? That was your calling card. Towns you passed through found vines growing overnight. Fermented juice bubbling in sealed jars. The occasional leopard sighting, just for flair. But not everyone welcomed you. Pentheus, the famously skeptical king of Thebes, tried to outlaw your cult. You convinced him to dress in drag and spy on your rites. Then was messy. Let's just say he got too into character. Historians still argue whether the story was an allegory for gender transgression, divine punishment, or a cautionary tale about bad costumes. Anyway, you've spent years doing your divine homework. Now, it's time to show a few pirates what your syllabus looks like. The ship pulls away from shore. The sky is cloudless. The sea like glass. A perfect day for maritime crime. Acoetes tries again. Captain, this isn't wise. The captain spits overboard. Worry about the sails. You look down at your fingers. Run them along a coil of rope. The wood beneath you is soaked with salt and old regrets. You wonder briefly if the ship will hold up for what's coming. Spoiler, it won't. Meanwhile, the pirates begin planning. Someone suggests Corinth. Another votes for Lydia. The bidding wars in both cities are lively this time of year. They're already calculating how many coins your cloak alone will fetch. Still, you say nothing. You've always known how mortals treat strangers. How quick they are to devalue what they don't understand. You could change their minds gently, but where's the lesson in that? Now here's tonight's fringe detail. There's a lesser-known version of your story where you arrive on the ship completely unconscious, possibly passed out from too much wine, and the pirates still try to sell you. So even when you're asleep, you're triggering life-altering mythological events. Iconic behavior, honestly. The sun climbs higher. The crew laughs louder. One of them tunes a lyre that hasn't had new strings since the last Olympics. Acoetes leans against the mast, clearly regretting every decision that brought him here. Then a breeze shifts. It's soft, barely noticeable, but it carries a scent the pirates don't expect. Not salt or sweat or rope. Something sweeter. Grapes, crushed and fermenting. Flowers that don't grow at sea. A hint of beeswax and myrrh. The helmsman sniffs the air. What is that? No one answers. But everyone hears the faint sound of flutes. No flautus. Just flutes. Invisible. Mournful. Beckoning. You cross your legs and hum along. That's when the vines start to grow. They slither up from the base of the mast, curling around the ropes like they've been waiting for this ship their entire plant lives. Leaves unfurl. Clusters of deep purple grapes swell into being. The wood creaks. The sails sag, not from wind, but from weight. The rigging drips with wine. A barrel pops open on its own. The captain stares. What in Hades? You smile. Tilt your head. Someone yelps. A leopard, not a carving, not a hallucination, a full-grown actual leopard, now lounges at the bow, licking its paw like it belongs there. Another joins it, curling up by the anchor chain. This is the part where fear sets in. The crew scrambles. One pirate tries to cut down a vine. The blade snaps. Another reaches for the helm. It's soft, sticky, covered in honeycomb. And through it all, you sit there, serene. You gave them a chance. Several actually. Acoetes, wide-eyed and very much not helping the others, whispers, "He's a god." Finally, someone reads the vibe. This moment, this turning of tables at sea, is one of your finest. You don't lash out in fire or thunder. You enchant. You overwhelm. You make reality melt until the only thing left is belief. It's a more elegant terror. Because here's the twist, you don't want revenge. Not really. You want recognition. Respect. a little divine fear. You want these men to understand that not everything that looks soft is weak. That joy isn't the absence of power. That madness has teeth. The sea, until now so calm, begins to churn. The sky dims, as though a cloud has passed over the sun, except there are no clouds. Just the thick scent of wine and jasmine. The flutes play louder, then fade into an eerie silence. You rise slowly. No words. Just presence. The pirates freeze. And somewhere in the back of their minds, they finally remember a story, half a tavern tale, half a warning, about a god who walks like a man, drinks like a fool, and punishes like a poet. You're not the hostage. You're the storm. The ship begins to lurch, not with wind or waves, but like it's recoiling from something it no longer wants to be part of. The pirates, brave only in numbers and hungover confidence, scramble to make sense of what's happening. One drops to his knees, whispering half-remembered prayers. Another clutches a wine-soaked rope like it's going to save him. It won't. You don't move. You just stand there, centered, as the ship tilts like a stage being set for the final act. Wine flows down the mast like blood from a wound. The grapes sag heavier and heavier, pulsing like they're alive, or more alive than the crew at this point. The scent is overpowering. Fermented sugar, wild roses, smoke. The leopards are prowling now, eyes glinting gold, teeth glinting sharper. The men try to flee, but where? You're in the middle of the sea. No sails, no oars. Just vines, beasts, and a barefoot god whose smile is now gone. You aren't angry. You've gone past anger. You've entered the soft silence before transformation. And then it happens. One man leaps overboard. He never hits the water. Halfway through the dive, his legs fuse together. His feet stretch, flatten, become fins. His hands flap out like fans. His back arches, curves, stretches longer. His scream distorts into a high-pitched whistle. He hits the sea not as a man, but as a dolphin. The others watch, frozen. You turn your head, slowly toward them. Another jumps. Same result. Then another. And another. Flesh melts to skin. Legs disappear. Tails ripple into being. And each splash into the sea echoes like a church bell. Final, transforming, irreversible. Within minutes, the ship is eerily quiet. Just you, acoites, and the leopards. The water below teems with sleek gray bodies, dolphins, chittering and circling the boat like confused toddlers in an unfamiliar pool. They leap and spin, not from joy, but from leftover panic. You can tell the difference. Acoites sinks to his knees. He doesn't run. He doesn't scream. He doesn't even blink. You walk over to him slowly, your foot falls light, like the god you are trying very hard to stay polite about being. You knew, you say, voice like wind through leaves. He nods. I had guessed. You tilt your head. And still you said nothing. He swallows. I didn't think they'd listen. I didn't want to anger you. You crouch beside him eye to eye. You didn't. And then you smile again, not the warning kind this time, but the kind that says you're safe. The leopards purr like oversized kittens, and the ship, now vine-wrapped in dripping honey, rocks gently like a cradle. This is the version of the story that artists loved to paint. The god, serene in chaos. The pirates, now dolphins, learning a new language of clicks and sonar. And the one mortal who survives, not because he's strong or brave, but because he understood. Let's anchor this with a mainstream historical fact. Dolphins held a sacred status in the ancient Greek world. Killing one could get you executed. They were considered signs from the gods, particularly Apollo, and you guessed it, This myth might have been a way to explain why dolphins were so friendly to sailors, why they appeared to rescue shipwrecked men, why they followed boats like little divine escorts. Maybe, just maybe, they were trying to get back to land, in legs. And here's your fringe detail for tonight. Some later versions of this tale claim the dolphins retained partial memory of their human lives. That sometimes, on quiet nights, sailors heard the dolphins calling their old names, or trying to warn others not to make the same mistake. Historians still argue whether the transformation was meant as punishment or promotion. Were the pirates cursed for their greed, or blessed with a new form that let them escape their human flaws? There's no official answer, and you're not telling. You like your stories a little open-ended. Back on the ship, Acoetes carefully rises. He looks around at the floral explosion coating the deck, the beasts now napping, the endless sea peppered with joyful dorsal fins. Then he looks at you and asks the only logical question left. What now? You look to the east, where the sky is starting to warm into a peachy glow. Dawn's close. The party's over. We go to Naxos, you say simply. Acoetes blinks. Why? And for the first time all night, your voice sounds almost wistful. There's someone I'm supposed to meet. And just like that, you extend your hand. He hesitates, then takes it. The two of you, plus a few purring jungle cats, sail eastward under a sky that still doesn't quite know what happened. The dolphins trail behind like an honor guard, splashing and spinning. You ride in silence for a while, but your mind's already moving ahead. There's a mountain waiting for you, a cave, and a girl with stars in her eyes and abandonment in her past. But we'll get to Ariadne later. For now, you let the salt wind tousle your curls. You watch the dolphins. One of them looks up at you, dark eyes, intelligent, almost embarrassed. Maybe he remembers. Maybe not. Either way, you nod. A small mercy, given late, but given. Acoetes stares ahead, stunned into a kind of sacred quiet. You wonder what he'll do after this. If he'll tell the story. If anyone will believe him. Spoiler, they won't. At least, not the way it happened. But stories like this don't need belief to survive. They just need to be told. By the time you reach Naxos, the sky has unfolded into a dusty gold, the kind that smells like olive trees and promises. You and Acoetes step off the vine-cradled ship like it's an everyday ferry. The leopards leap off too, immediately vanishing into the brush, because even divine cats don't like to hang around once the mission's over. The island is quiet, hilly, wild in a way that suggests secrets. Your feet touch warm sand, and you feel the tug again. The pull. You've been here before in dreams, or maybe you left a version of yourself behind last time you passed through. Acoetes follows you silently, looking over his shoulder once or twice as if half expecting the dolphins to sprout legs and ask for their jobs back. The path leads uphill. Cypress trees cluster around you. The air is sticky with nectar. You don't have to look far before you find her. She's asleep, curled like a discarded ribbon on the shore of a cave. Her hair is a tangled halo. Her dress, royal, once, is torn in the way that says she stopped caring a long time ago. The sea licks the hem of her skirt, respectful but curious. You pause, watching her breathe. Ariadne, daughter of King Minos, sister to the Minotaur, princess of Crete, expert maze solver and recently ghosted girlfriend of one Theseus. She looks like a myth waiting to be rewritten. Here's your history bullet. Ariadne's role in the myth of Theseus and the Minotaur is more than just a damsel in distress moment. She's the architect of the escape, the brains, the thread strategist. Without her, Theseus would have ended up Minotaur Chow. But what does he do after she saves his toga-clad behind? He dumps her. On this very island. While she's sleeping. Honestly, it's amazing the guy didn't get turned into a garden slug by someone. You step closer, your shadow falling across her cheek. She stirs. You wait. She blinks up at you, groggy and clearly thinking she's hallucinating. Who? Just someone who's good at finding lost things. She sits up slowly, scanning the shoreline, the ship, Acoetes, who waves awkwardly, and finally you. Her eyes narrow. Not scared. Suspicious. Smart. You're not mortal. You nod. Not anymore. God. You tilt your head. Depends who's asking. That earns a ghost of a smile. She wipes her face with the back of her hand, shaking sand from her hair. There's a fire in her, banked but burning. The kind of fire that comes from betrayal. From knowing you gave everything, and someone walked away without a backward glance. Acoetes awkwardly offers her a piece of fruit. She takes it, eats it slowly, never breaking eye contact with you. And for a moment, the world narrows to this stretch of beach. To you, to her, to the myth that's just waiting to unfold. You walk with her up the hillside, where olive trees whisper about long-lost queens. She tells her story in clipped words. How Theseus promised love. How she gave him the thread. How he sailed away without her. You listen. Really listen. And when she finishes, she expects you to say something profound. You don't. Instead, you pluck a fig from a branch and hand it to her. She laughs. And just like that, something shifts. That night, you conjure a celebration, not the raucous, wine-soaked frenzy you're known for, but something gentler. Lanterns strung from trees. Musicians who play like the stars are listening. You teach her to dance. Not like a princess. Like a wild thing. Like someone who's remembered her body is still hers. The island comes alive around her. And so do you. Fringe tidbit time. In some lesser-known versions of your myth, Dionysus and Ariadne don't just fall in love, they create an entire cult together. She becomes his priestess, his equal, even his advisor. She's not just the rebound queen. She's the co-founder of chaos and delight. As the music plays, you spin her once, twice, then pause beneath a fig tree and say, "I can give you a crown." She frowns. "I had one. This one's better." You reach up, not to the tree, but the sky, and pull down a ring of stars. Golden. Glowing. You place it gently on her head. It fits. That's how the Corona Borealis enters the night sky. A constellation still visible in the northern hemisphere, a circlet of 7 stars. Not for you. For her. Historians still argue whether this part of the myth reflects an actual celestial observation, a symbolic elevation of feminine power, or just a really great romantic flourish added by a particularly dramatic poet. Either way, the crown remains. Immortalized. Undeniable. You don't marry her right away. You give her space. But over time, the two of you become inseparable. She steadies your chaos. You stir up her silence. It works. And as the weeks pass, the island becomes more than a stopover. It becomes a sanctuary. People arrive, followers, seekers, lovers of the vine and the ritual. Acoetes builds a shrine in your honor. Leopards lounge in sun-drenched groves. The air fills with drumbeats and poetry. You don't force anyone to join. You never do. That's the point of your divinity. It's invitation, not command. But oh, what an invitation. One evening, Ariadne sits beside you, watching the firelight flicker across dancing feet. "They'll come for us eventually," she says. You nod. "They always do. But not tonight." "No," you agree. "Not tonight." The stars burn brighter. The wine flows freely. The god of ecstasy and the queen of abandonment sit side by side, no longer alone, no longer lost. The pirates are dolphins now. The thread is forgotten, and the island sings. The wind changes on the third morning, less gentle, more insistent. You feel it before the others do, the way a wolf knows when something has crossed the perimeter of the forest. The party still flows in lazy loops, dancers draped in ivy, lyres plucking notes that drift over fig trees. But your fingers pause around a cup of wine. You tilt your head. You smell ambition. You step away from the fire, away from Ariadne's sleeping form, and follow the breeze downhill to the beach. The moon is high. The water looks like polished glass. And just there, on the horizon, are sails. Not your kind. These are stiff, straight-edged things, adorned with symbols of law, war, order. Not vines. Not leopards. Not fun. You sigh. They found us. By dawn, the strangers are on the sand, armor glinting like teeth. You wait for them with a half-smile and a half-pitcher of wine. Behind you, the camp stirs to life, slower than usual. Maybe they sense it too, that this morning's song has a sharper edge. The leader of the newcomers steps forward, spear in hand, chin lifted like it's been sculpted for intimidation. You already don't like him. I'm Pentheus, he says. Of course you are. Let's insert our mainstream fact here. Pentheus was a real name used among Theban royalty. In mythology, he's the king of Thebes, known for opposing your cult with the kind of energy usually reserved for tax audits and standardized testing. His legend is tragic, although not for you. You sip your wine and eye his entourage. They're armed, but twitchy. Not a good mix. We've heard rumors, Pentheus says. Drunken riots. Naked women in the woods. Animal sacrifices. Are you the one they call Dionysus? I might be, you reply, but your delivery was dry. Try again. He scowls. You're under arrest. You snort. Good luck with that. Behind you, the trees rustle. Someone giggles, probably one of the Maenads, already tipsy on morning nectar and mischief. Pentheus gestures, and a few soldiers move forward, aiming to encircle you. Bad idea. Vines sprout from the sand, fast and thick, grabbing ankles like hungry hands. The soldiers stumble. One shrieks as a leopard. Where did that come from? Stalks past him, unimpressed. Pentheus, to his credit, holds his ground. You think this circus scares me? You raise an eyebrow. No, but you should be scared of your own curiosity. This is where things get interesting. You let them take you. Just like that. You let the vines recede. The leopards vanish into the brush. You hand your wine jug to a Maenad, ruffle Acoetes' hair as you pass, and walk straight into the enemy's hands. Pentheus binds you with bronze chains, because he thinks bronze is god-proof. Adorable. You don't fight. You're humming. They march you back to Thebes. The trip takes days. Along the way, the soldiers get twitchy. Strange things happen at night. Their rations ferment. Their dreams get crowded. Someone swears a lion was sleeping beside them. You never complain. You walk barefoot, serene, like someone enjoying a particularly slow-moving spa weekend. And then comes Thebes. Stone walls, high gates, temples to other gods, sterner gods, older ones, who don't laugh at jokes or dance barefoot at midnight. Pentheus drags you through the streets like a trophy. Crowds gather. Some stare. Some laugh. But some look too long. You see it in their eyes. The pull. They've heard of you. They've dreamt of you. They want what you offer. Ecstasy. Freedom. The chance to become something more. Pentheus doesn't notice. He's too busy staging your trial. He brings you before the court, accuses you of corrupting the youth, seducing women into the wild, making men forget their duties. You reply, I only show people what was already inside them. If that's dangerous, maybe ask why. The council murmurs. Pentheus silences them with a glare. Lock him up, he says. In the palace. I want him watched. No tricks. They take you to a stone chamber and bolt the doors. Thick chains. No windows. You sit. You smile. And then you vanish. Here's a quirky myth detail. According to the old plays, most famously the Bacchae by Euripides, no prison can hold you. When they return to check on you, your chains are coiled neatly like sleeping snakes, and the guards are passed out, snoring with ivy growing from their helmets. You stroll out the front gate. Not invisibly, not sneaky. You just leave. Later, you find Pentheus brooding alone in his hall, sharpening his sword like that'll help. He jumps when he sees you. How did you? You interrupt him. You want proof I'm a god? He stiffens. Yes. Then come with me. He hesitates. You step closer. You'll see everything. Just dress like a woman first. His jaw drops. You grin. Maenads, you explain, only allow women into their rituals. If he wants to see them in their natural state, whatever that means, he'll have to blend in. Those wigs. Maybe a little blush. You even help him pick the outfit. He agrees because, let's be honest, he's desperate for control and curious to the point of danger. Historians still argue whether this disguise scene is symbolic of the loss of masculine authority or just an excuse for tragicomic cross-dressing. Either way, it's happening. He follows you into the forest, flinching at every crackle of leaves. Birds scatter. The air grows thick. You can hear the drums before he does. And then bam, you're there. The Maenads whirl like wild wind. They wear skins and stars, eyes glowing, bodies moving in that way that defies gravity and shame. Pentheus stares, transfixed. You whisper, "Go closer." He does. Too close. One of the Maenads turns, eyes wide, and screams, "A man! A spy!" It spirals quickly. They don't recognize him. They don't recognize anything except betrayal. They descend. And you step back into shadow. That's when tragedy cracks through ecstasy. But hold up. We'll get to the full horror in a minute. For now, let's freeze the frame here. Pentheus, in disguise, surrounded, reaching for control and finding only chaos. The vines twist tighter. The drums grow louder. And you, barefoot and unreadable, wait for what comes next. You don't shout. You don't intervene. You just stand still, watching as Pentheus, trembling in borrowed silk and shame, tries to make sense of the wild tide rising around him. The Maenads close in, not with knives, not with spears, but with hands and cries and a fury older than civilization. These women have danced too long under moonlight, breathed too deeply of your sacred vapors, and shed too many layers of what the world told them to be. They don't see a prince in drag. They see a threat. A peeping, spying shadow in the wrong place at the wrong time. A crack of wood echoes like thunder as the first branch strikes. He stumbles back. Wait, I'm not. Too late, he screams. The sound is high-pitched, animal, unroyal. And then, someone grips him by the arm, someone stronger than you'd expect, and you see her face. Agave, his mother. Let that settle. In a twist of myth that even your wildest festivals couldn't script, it's Pentheus' own mother who leads the charge. She doesn't recognize him. The frenzy clouds everything, sight, memory, reason. To her, he's just a mountain lion in a man's skin. A beast threatening the sacred rites. She strikes next. And Pentheus shatters. Now, here's where things get blurry, both in history and in myth. Some versions say the Maenads tear him limb from limb. Others insist he dies quickly, mercifully. The older poets, though, they revel in the detail. They say Agave, blood-spattered and triumphant, carries his head back to Thebes like a prize melon, cradling it and cooing to it like it's a hunting trophy. Quirky tidbit, some ancient vases actually depict Agave holding a severed head with pride. Like it's a centerpiece. Art historians still can't decide if this was a commentary on maternal blindness, religious ecstasy, or just ancient Greek horrorcore chic. You don't stop the madness. You don't rewind the mistake. That's not how this works. You offered truth. You warned him. He made his choice. When the frenzy fades, when dawn burns the fog from their eyes, Agave stumbles home with her prize. She's halfway through the city before anyone realizes what she's carrying. You're already waiting there. Thebes is silent. Too silent. The guards no longer meet your eyes. The priests, who were so bold just a week ago, now shuffle and mumble, trying to avoid your gaze. Because here's the thing. A god doesn't need temples. A god needs belief. And after today, no one in Thebes doubts you. Not anymore. Acolyte stands beside you, silent, watching Agave approach. She's singing softly to herself, cradling the head. You catch a glimmer of joy in her face, the kind that comes after victory. You sigh. Let her see, you whisper. And just like that, the spell lifts. She blinks. Her fingers tremble. The head rolls slightly in her arms, revealing the twisted features, the still open eyes. Her breath catches. And the scream that follows? It cracks the sky. She collapses. The head thuds against stone. The people of Thebes rush to her side, but no one knows what to say. How do you comfort someone who just killed their own son? You turn away. You've seen enough. Historians still argue whether this part of your myth represents the consequences of ignoring divine balance, or the ancient tension between city order and rural ecstasy. Some say Pentheus symbolizes law, and you, the wild truth it can't contain. Others claim it's just a really dark PSA about respecting religious practices. Either way, Thebes will never be the same. You walk away without looking back. Let the people grieve. Let them rebuild. You have other places to be. Other initiates to awaken. Because word spreads fast. Faster than a ship on calm waters. The story of the god who came in disguise, who punished the arrogant, who crowned the brokenhearted, who dances with leopards and turns fools into fish, it travels. You become a legend. And with that legend comes the growth of your following. Let's paint the scene, torchlit caves filled with rhythm. Women and men, royalty and servants, stripped of rank and role, wearing nothing but ivy and moonlight. Drums throb like heartbeats. Wine flows like prophecy. The forest becomes a temple, and the temple becomes a gateway. You move among them, unseen and seen, whispering to their bones. And here's the secret they never tell you in those polished marble myths. Your cult doesn't demand obedience. It demands release. It doesn't promise safety. It promises transformation. There's a reason so many come to you in grief, in madness, in loss. You take what's raw, what's broken, and you amplify it until it becomes something else entirely. Something divine. In one grove, a former soldier beats rhythms on an overturned shield. In another, a widow dances barefoot until her tears turn to laughter. A girl who was silenced for years finds her voice in a Maenad's cry. A boy afraid of his own shadow wraps himself in leopard print and howls at the moon. They all find you. Or rather, they find themselves. You are the god of wine, sure. But more than that, you're the god of release. Of boundaries undone. Of masks shattered. You don't offer comfort. You offer the truth, sharp and intoxicating. You wander from land to land, sometimes barefoot, sometimes cloaked in gold. Always watching. Always nudging. And somewhere, Ariadne waits. Back on Naxos, she tends the sanctuary. She dances beneath your stars. She keeps the wine warm and the music ready. You return to her in phases. Like the moon. One night, she looks at you across a fire and says, "You've changed." You nod. "So have you?" She doesn't ask what happened in Thebes. She knows. She can smell it on you, the regret and the inevitability, the thin thread between justice and cruelty. You don't sleep that night. Gods rarely do. But you lie beside her, watching the stars, listening to the hum of cicadas and the breath of a world that never stops spinning. There's a softness in the air, the kind that comes after storms. You trace constellations in the sky, naming each one after a lesson. And somewhere in that hush, you whisper to no one in particular, "Don't spy on the divine unless you're ready to see yourself." The vines curl gently at your feet, the leopards doze, and the island sings you both back into silence. You start to notice the pattern. Wherever you go, things ripple, like wine catching light or water touched by wind. Cities twist, forests bloom overnight, people laugh too long or cry too easily. Order buckles. And always, there's that moment when someone realizes you're not just a beautiful wanderer with too much charisma and great hair. You're a god. A wild one. And people either adore you for it, or panic. Take Thebes. Oh, Thebes. You should have known it would get messy. It always does when family's involved. Because Thebes? That's your hometown. The place where Semele, your mother, your mortal spark, was incinerated by Zeus's presence when she asked to see him in full glory. The place where you, unborn and endangered, were sewn into Zeus's thigh like some celestial pocket warmer and carried to term in divine secrecy. You have history here. And you expect, what? A parade? A statue? At least a polite, "Welcome back, sorry we let your mom get barbecued?" Instead, they scoff, especially Pentheus. Now there's a guy who could use a nap and a therapist. Your cousin, the new king, sharp-jawed, sandal-strapped, and deeply allergic to anything remotely fun. He's terrified of chaos. And you? You radiate chaos the way a star radiates heat. He hears you've arrived, followed by ecstatic women, whispering miracles, and the occasional goat that talks in rhymes. And he decides, this cannot stand. He calls a council, declares you a fraud, says no nephew of his dances with maenads and inspires flute-playing mobs. You show up at his palace gates like it's open mic night. "Hello, cousin," you say, draped in gold and wine and probably wearing eyeliner too perfectly smudged to be mortal. Pentheus tries to arrest you. You smile. And now the stage is set. Mainstream moment. Euripides' play The Bacchae tells this story best. It's not just a tragedy. It's a cautionary tale soaked in wine. Pentheus, all rules and rigidity, tries to suppress your cult and ends up unraveling, quite literally, under the weight of his own denial. You let him capture you. Let him tie your hands. Let him mock your worship, your women, your animal skin cloaks. And you sit calmly in his prison, watching the walls tremble slightly as vines begin to slither from the floor. You might want to reinforce the doors, you offer. He doesn't listen. You don't need to escape. The walls do it for you. They crack and sigh and open like a sighing lover. You walk free, trailing ivy and doves, your smile slow and infuriating. Pentheus is furious. He tries again, doubles the guards, calls you names that would make a satyr blush. You appear in his chambers the next night, lounging on his bed. "Let's go dancing," you whisper, and somehow he says yes. Well, not exactly in those words. You convince him to dress up as a woman, to spy on your maenads, those frenzied, worshipping women now dancing and howling in the mountains just beyond Thebes. You tell him he'll be invisible, that no one will recognize him if he wears their garb, ties his hair up, and walks lightly. Pentheus, so desperate to understand, to control, to know, he agrees. He slips into the dress. You adjust the hem. He frowns at the mirror. You murmur encouragement. You make a stunning maenad, you whisper, and he actually blushes. Quirky tidbit. There's genuine academic debate about whether Pentheus' cross-dressing in the Bacchae was seen as comedic, tragic, or deeply transgressive. Some scholars say it's a metaphor for losing one's grip on masculine control. Others say it's simply the inevitable result of repressing wildness for too long. Either way, the outfit is fabulous. Together, you climb the mountain. You hang back. Let him go ahead. The Maenads are already in motion, dancing, spinning, lost in the rhythm of wind and stars. Their eyes gleam. Their hands drip with wine and wildflowers. And when they see Pentheus, something shifts. They don't see a man in disguise. They see a threat. A spy. A king trying to control what should never be caged. And they descend. You watch from the shadows. You could stop it, but you don't. They tear him apart, not out of cruelty, but out of sheer, blind devotion. Madness kisses reverence, and the lines blur. And the cruelest twist? It's his mother, Agave, who delivers the final blow, lost in ecstasy, believing him to be a lion or some monster sent to challenge the god. Only later, when her frenzy fades, does she see what she's done. You step out as dawn breaks, sunlight catching the blood on their hands, the disbelief in their eyes. Next time, you say softly, believe. Historians still argue whether this myth is a condemnation of religious excess or a warning against denying the irrational parts of human nature. But you don't care about the academic takes. You just know this. Pentheus tried to suppress joy, ecstasy, surrender. And it broke him. Thebes remembers. Thebes rebuilds. And Thebes leaves a space now in its prayers, just for you. You wander on. Past fields where the grapes grow fatter than they should. Past streams that hum your name. Past whispers of your Maenads, still dancing somewhere in the folds of the world. You don't gloat. Okay, maybe a little. But you mostly feel steady. The wildness inside you no longer surges uncontrolled. It flows directed, channeled, like wine in a cup. And you think, just for a moment, that maybe you've mastered it. But of course, the gods are never done testing themselves. And your next test? It won't be a king. It'll be a war. You move through islands now like a breeze that's just slightly too intoxicating. Everyone's heard the stories. The ship turned to jungle. The pirates who chirp now instead of steal. The women who howl under moonlight and forget their pain in the rhythm of your rites. Your name is spoken in half-whispers and drunken songs, etched into cave walls and wine jugs, muttered during childbirths and shouted during bonfires. You're a rumor that has teeth. And yet there are still skeptics. Boys. Especially in the cities. You arrive at Ikaria next, a jagged little island with cliffs sharp as broken oaths and villagers twice as suspicious. You come as usual, a foreigner in silks, sandals too clean for travel, hair a bit too shiny for someone who claims to have walked through a storm. Merchant, they ask. You shrug. Let's say I trade in experiences. They don't like that. The Icarians are proud, fishers, builders, grape growers. No-nonsense people. When your followers light fires and start singing in the woods that first night, they mutter. When a statue of you appears in the olive grove the next morning, fully formed and a little too anatomically correct, they get spooked. So they do what people always do when faced with the unknown. They try to trap it. The elders send word to the governor. There's a suspicious youth claiming divinity, stirring up women and weird weather. The governor, a man who's never laughed without wincing, orders your arrest. You let them. They don't even use chains. Just a big iron cauldron. They invite you for wine and discussion, then slam the lid shut and place it over a fire. Now, here's where things get steamy. Literally. The cauldron shakes. Bubbles hiss. The villagers whisper. They think they've caught a fraud. But then, smoke. A lot of smoke. It pours from the seams, curls like fingers, thick and perfumed. A strange laughter echoes from within. The cauldron begins to rattle harder, until it lifts, yes, lifts into the air, floating a good foot above the flames. Someone screams, and then the lid flies off. Ivy spills out. Doves and snakes pour from the opening like it's a magician's hat. And you rise from the steam, wreathed in grapevines, eyes glowing faintly gold, completely untouched by the heat. Nice party trick, you say. They run. You don't chase them. You just step out, barefoot and steaming slightly, and pick up a fig from a basket. Definitely yours now. Mainstream history break. Ikaria is, in real-world tradition, linked to your worship. Ancient ruins there include shrines to Dionysus, and festivals honoring your revels were held into late antiquity. The region even became known for its heady, sleep-inducing wine, which, let's face it, sounds exactly like your kind of souvenir. Quirky footnote? Some old villagers on Ikaria still believe in the god in the smoke. They leave out figs and wine during hot spells, just in case you feel like stopping by. Anyway, back to the fire. The villagers regroup. You didn't smite them, and that's unnerving. So instead of apologizing, they throw a festival. Because that's what humans do when they can't explain something, they turn it into a party and hope the gods join in. You approve. They roast lambs. They light torches. They dance a little too stiffly at first, unsure if you'll strike them down for being offbeat. You don't. You just dance with them. By dawn, the governor is crying into your shoulder and calling you his radiance. The skeptics are passed out on carpets of moss. And the sea sings softly just beyond the cliffs, where the dolphins have gathered to eavesdrop. You drift back into the woods with a full belly and an even fuller sense of satisfaction. But not everything goes so smoothly. Across the Aegean, in the mountain town of Nyssa, things get complicated. You arrive expecting reverence. After all, some say Nyssa is where you were raised, hidden from Hera's wrath and fed by nymphs. That's the legend, the cradle of your myth. But time forgets. People forget. Nyssa now is a fortress of logic and order. No wild rites. No moonlit dances. Just tidy temples and scrolls and old men arguing over syllables. They claim to remember you fondly as a child god, a local fable. But they don't worship. They don't feel. So you bring the feeling back. You send vines creeping through the gutters. You fill their wells with honey. You appear at night to the dreamers, whispering songs no lyre could replicate. You walk through walls. You make statues blink. The people begin to stir. But the high priest doesn't like it. He sees you for what you are, a threat to his tidy scrolls, to his measured chants. So he gathers the scholars, the orators, the anxious rich. They plan an exorcism. You don't stop them. You just show up at the ritual dressed in a leopard cloak, sipping from a wine horn, and sit cross-legged in the center of their circle. You summoned me? You ask, deadpan. They chant louder. You wink. And then, nothing. No thunder. No transformation. You just sit there. It unnerves them. And here's the trick. You don't always need to explode into vines and madness. Sometimes, your power is in making people question why you haven't. They crack under the pressure. One priest starts sobbing. Another runs screaming into the hills. The rest disperse like smoke. You rise, stretch, and flick your fingers. Just a little flourish. Enough for a fig tree to bloom in the middle of their marble floor. That'll grow fast, you say. Maybe water it. Historians still debate whether Dionysus was worshipped in Nyssa because of its supposed role in your upbringing, or whether the myths were invented later to explain the city's ecstatic cult practices. As always with you, the line between origin and aftermath is fuzzy. You walk the streets that night like you never left. The stars feel brighter. The people feel softer. The wine feels warmer. You're not here to punish. You're here to remind. Remind them that behind every rule is chaos. Behind every mask, a face. And behind every face, desire. The kind that dances. The kind that sings. The kind that leaps from cliffs with joy because it trusts the sea to catch it. You whisper that truth to a sleeping couple. To a dreaming child. To a lonely widow tending her fire. And somewhere, off the coast, the dolphins leap again. You start to notice the pattern. Wherever you go, things ripple, like wine catching light or water touched by wind. Cities twist, forests bloom overnight, people laugh too long or cry too easily. Order buckles. And always, there's that moment when someone realizes you're not just a beautiful wanderer with too much charisma and great hair. You're a god. A wild one. And people either adore you for it, or panic. Take Thebes. Oh, Thebes. You should have known it would get messy. It always does when family's involved. Because Thebes? That's your hometown. The place where Semele, your mother, your mortal spark, was incinerated by Zeus's presence when she asked to see him in full glory. The place where you, unborn and endangered, were sewn into Zeus's thigh like some celestial pocket warmer and carried to term in divine secrecy. You have history here. And you expect, what? A parade? A statue? At least a polite, welcome back, sorry we let your mom get barbecued? Instead, they scoff, especially Pentheus. Now there's a guy who could use a nap and a therapist. Your cousin, the new king, sharp-jawed, sandal-strapped, and deeply allergic to anything remotely fun. He's terrified of chaos. And you? You radiate chaos the way a star radiates heat. He hears you've arrived, followed by ecstatic women, whispering miracles, and the occasional goat that talks in rhymes. And he decides, this cannot stand. He calls a council, declares you a fraud, says no nephew of his dances with maenads and inspires flute-playing mobs. You show up at his palace gates like it's open mic night. Hello, cousin, you say, draped in gold and wine and probably wearing eyeliner too perfectly smudged to be mortal. Pentheus tries to arrest you. You smile. And now the stage is set. Mainstream moment. Euripides' play The Bacchae tells this story best. It's not just a tragedy. It's a cautionary tale soaked in wine. Pentheus, all rules and rigidity, tries to suppress your cult and ends up unraveling, quite literally, under the weight of his own denial. You let him capture you. Let him tie your hands. Let him mock your worship, your women, your animal skin cloaks. And you sit calmly in his prison, watching the walls tremble slightly as vines begin to slither from the floor. You might want to reinforce the doors, you offer. He doesn't listen. You don't need to escape. The walls do it for you. They crack and sigh and open like a sighing lover. You walk free, trailing ivy and doves, your smile slow and infuriating. Pentheus is furious. He tries again, doubles the guards, calls you names that would make a satyr blush. You appear in his chambers the next night, lounging on his bed. Let's go dancing, you whisper, and somehow he says yes. Well, not exactly in those words. You convince him to dress up as a woman, to spy on your maenads, those frenzied, worshipping women now dancing and howling in the mountains just beyond Thebes. You tell him he'll be invisible, that no one will recognize him if he wears their garb, ties his hair up, and walks lightly. Pentheus, so desperate to understand, to control, to know, he agrees. He slips into the dress. You adjust the hem. He frowns at the mirror. You murmur encouragement. You make a stunning maenad, you whisper, and he actually blushes. Quirky tidbit. There's genuine academic debate about whether Pentheus' cross-dressing in the Bacchae was seen as comedic, tragic, or deeply transgressive. Some scholars say it's a metaphor for losing one's grip on masculine control. Others say it's simply the inevitable result of repressing wildness for too long. Either way, the outfit is fabulous. Together, you climb the mountain. You hang back. Let him go ahead. The maenads are already in motion, dancing, spinning, lost in the rhythm of wind and stars. Their eyes gleam. Their hands drip with wine and wildflowers. And when they see Pentheus, something shifts. They don't see a man in disguise. They see a threat. A spy. A king trying to control what should never be caged. And they descend. You watch from the shadows. You could stop it, but you don't. They tear him apart, not out of cruelty, but out of sheer, blind devotion. Madness kisses reverence, and the lines blur. And the cruelest twist? It's his mother, Agave, who delivers the final blow, lost in ecstasy, believing him to be a lion or some monster sent to challenge the god. Only later, when her frenzy fades, does she see what she's done. You step out as dawn breaks, sunlight catching the blood on their hands, the disbelief in their eyes. Next time, you say softly, "Believe." Historians still argue whether this myth is a condemnation of religious excess or a warning against denying the irrational parts of human nature. But you don't care about the academic takes. You just know this. Pentheus tried to suppress joy, ecstasy, surrender. And it broke him. Thebes remembers. Thebes rebuilds. And Thebes leaves a space now in its prayers, just for you. You wander on. Past fields where the grapes grow fatter than they should. Past streams that hum your name. Past whispers of your maenads, still dancing somewhere in the folds of the world. You don't gloat. Okay, maybe a little. But you mostly feel steady. The wildness inside you no longer surges uncontrolled. It flows directed, channeled, like wine in a cup. And you think, just for a moment, that maybe you've mastered it. But of course, the gods are never done testing themselves. And your next test? It won't be a king. It'll be a war. It starts as a whisper, not one of your soft, vine-wrapped whispers that turns into a dance or a dream or a regrettable tattoo. No, this is a different kind of murmur. Oh, bitter. The rustle of strategy. The scraping of bronze. A whisper made of war. The giants are stirring. Born of Gaia herself, giants are the universe's angry stepchildren, huge, half-divine, and permanently annoyed. They don't like the Olympians, don't care for order, and especially don't like Zeus and his shiny lightning bolts. They want the old ways back, chaos, earthborn rule, and no wine at parties. So they rise. Spears taller than trees. Feet that crack mountains. Voices that make the sky shiver. And the Olympians? They panic just a little. This isn't just a bad weather day. This is the gigantomachy, the giant war. All hands, hooves, and halos on deck. Even the usually apathetic gods are suddenly doing push-ups and sharpening divine spears. And what about you? Well, this is awkward. Because you're not exactly an original Olympian, are you? You're newer. Not quite part of the Golden Core. Not a lightning slinger or warlord. You weren't born in Olympus. You weren't raised in celestial nurseries. You grew up in caves, under grapevines, on stories whispered by nymphs. Some say you're too wild, too soft, too drunk, too emotional, too wrapped in song and sensation to be useful in a battle. You hear the murmurs, even among your so-called family. They forget, as people often do, that wild things are also ferocious. So you show them. You show up to the war in full regalia, leopard cloak billowing, ivy crown sharp as thorns, staff in hand. But not a spear, not a sword. You bring a pine cone-tipped wand, your thyrsus. And somehow, impossibly, it works. You don't fight like Ares, roaring and stomping. You don't hurl lightning like your dad. You dance into battle, lithe and gleaming, a blur of scent and color and sheer, terrifying beauty. Giants lunge. You sidestep, twirling. They roar. You sing. And where you go, madness follows. Not panic, ecstasy. A wild, blinding joy that melts minds. Your enemies stumble, dizzy. Their weapons feel heavy. Their arms shake. And then your maenads arrive. Oh yes, you brought backup. They descend like a thunderstorm in silk, hair unbound, feet bloody, eyes glowing. armed not with swords but with sheer devotion and an alarming number of wild animals. Lions, tigers, snakes, oh my. One giant gets pulled down by a leopard. Another flees, only to trip over a vine that shouldn't be there. You don't slay. You convert. And that's worse, somehow. Mainstream history moment. Ancient art often depicts Dionysus fighting in the Gigantomachy. He's not in every version, but in key vases and reliefs, especially from the 5th century BC, there you are, youthful and serene, hurling divine madness at towering foes. You're proof that chaos, wielded with grace, can be a weapon. Quirky twist? In some fringe versions of the myth, you ride into battle on a panther. Because, obviously, what's the point of war if you can't make an entrance? And here's the bit historians still debate. Did the Greeks include you in the Gigantomachy because they genuinely saw you as a war god in disguise, or because your cult was so powerful at the time that they had to add you to the big divine roll call? Either way, your performance speaks for itself. The giants fall. The world steadies. Zeus nods, maybe a little begrudgingly. Athena gives you a sideways glance of approval. Apollo offers you a wine refill, which is frankly ironic, since he's usually trying to temper your influence. And you? You just smile. You're welcome. But the high doesn't last. After every battle, there's cleanup. And the more mortals hear about the war, the more they start to twist the stories. Some say you tamed the giants with love songs. Some say you seduced them into surrender. Some even whisper that you drove them mad by showing them glimpses of their own desires. You don't correct them. Why should you? But you start to feel something shift in the air, unease, maybe. People love gods of war and lightning and clean victory. They're less sure what to do with gods who make them feel too much. Back in Phocis, a small town at the edge of a river, an old priest approaches you. We honor you, he says carefully, but we worry. About what? You ask, sipping a fig-infused cocktail that would make Poseidon weep with jealousy. You bring madness, Lord. Passion. Loss of control. It scares people. You nod. Then you gesture to the river. Water brings life, you say. But if you drink too fast, it drowns you. Is that the river's fault? He doesn't answer, but he leaves you grapes, which you eat. As you move on from Phocis, you begin to sense a growing division in how you're treated. In the villages, in the countryside, in the wild parts of the world where people feel deeply and live close to nature, they love you. They need you. You are their release valve, their carnival, their moment of shared, sacred chaos. But in the cities, you are a risk. You unsettle. You crack the marble. And the thing about cracks? Light gets in. Or vines. So you keep moving. Through towns with locked temples and towns with altars that never stop burning. You ride a donkey in one village, laughing with children. You appear as a woman in another, veiled and regal. You possess statues. You vanish into smoke. You appear in dreams to philosophers who wake up crying and scribbling verses they don't understand. You're a god who doesn't ask for worship. You invite it. And that invitation? It never expires. But still, you start to wonder. How long can ecstasy last before it becomes exhaustion? How long can a god burn bright before people turn away, blinking, and ask for something quieter? You don't have an answer yet. But something's pulling you westward, past the islands, past the old cities, toward Italy, where a new set of mortals, speaking a rougher language and building roads like veins across the land, are starting to look at Greek gods with hungry eyes. You'll meet them soon, and they'll give you a new name. The ship begins to lurch, not with wind or waves, but like it's recoiling from something it no longer wants to be part of. The pirates, brave only in numbers and hungover confidence, scramble to make sense of what's happening. One drops to his knees, whispering half-remembered prayers. Another clutches a wine-soaked rope like it's going to save him. It won't. You don't move. You just stand there, centered, as the ship tilts like a stage being set for the final act. Wine flows down the mast like blood from a wound. The grapes sag heavier and heavier, pulsing like they're alive, or more alive than the crew at this point. The scent is overpowering. Fermented sugar, wild roses, smoke. The leopards are prowling now, eyes glinting gold, teeth glinting sharper. The men try to flee, but where? You're in the middle of the sea. No sails, no oars. Just vines, beasts, and a barefoot god whose smile is now gone. You aren't angry. You've gone past anger. You've entered the soft silence before transformation. And then it happens. One man leaps overboard. He never hits the water. Halfway through the dive, his legs fuse together. His feet stretch, flatten, become fins. His hands flap out like fans. His back arches, curves, stretches longer. His scream distorts into a high-pitched whistle. He hits the sea not as a man, but as a dolphin. The others watch, frozen. You turn your head, slowly toward them. Another jumps. Same result. Then another. And another. Flesh melts to skin. Legs disappear. Tails ripple into being. And each splash into the sea echoes like a church bell. Final, transforming, irreversible. Within minutes, the ship is eerily quiet. Just you, acolytes, and the leopards. The water below teems with sleek gray bodies, dolphins, chittering and circling the boat like confused toddlers in an unfamiliar pool. They leap and spin, not from joy, but from leftover panic. You can tell the difference. Acolytes sinks to his knees. He doesn't run. He doesn't scream. He doesn't even blink. You walk over to him slowly, your foot falls light, like the god you are trying very hard to stay polite about being. You knew, you say, voice like wind through leaves. He nods. I had guessed. You tilt your head. And still you said nothing. He swallows. I didn't think they'd listen. I didn't want to anger you. You crouch beside him eye to eye. You didn't. And then you smile again, not the warning kind this time, but the kind that says you're safe. The leopards purr like oversized kittens, and the ship, now vine-wrapped in dripping honey, rocks gently like a cradle. This is the version of the story that artists loved to paint. The god, serene in chaos. The pirates, now dolphins, learning a new language of clicks and sonar. And the one mortal who survives, not because he's strong or brave, but because he understood. Let's anchor this with a mainstream historical fact. Dolphins held a sacred status in the ancient Greek world. Killing one could get you executed. They were considered signs from the gods, particularly Apollo, and you guessed it, This myth might have been a way to explain why dolphins were so friendly to sailors, why they appeared to rescue shipwrecked men, why they followed boats like little divine escorts. Maybe, just maybe, they were trying to get back to land, in legs. And here's your fringe detail for tonight. Some later versions of this tale claim the dolphins retained partial memory of their human lives. That sometimes, on quiet nights, sailors heard the dolphins calling their old names, or trying to warn others not to make the same mistake. Historians still argue whether the transformation was meant as punishment or promotion. Were the pirates cursed for their greed, or blessed with a new form that let them escape their human flaws? There's no official answer, and you're not telling. You like your stories a little open-ended. Back on the ship, Acolytes carefully rises. He looks around at the floral explosion coating the deck, the beasts now napping, the endless sea peppered with joyful dorsal fins. Then he looks at you and asks the only logical question left. What now? You look to the east, where the sky is starting to warm into a peachy glow. Dawn's close. The party's over. We go to Naxos, you say simply. Acolytes blinks. Why? And for the first time all night, Your voice sounds almost wistful. There's someone I'm supposed to meet. And just like that, you extend your hand. He hesitates, then takes it. The two of you, plus a few purring jungle cats, sail eastward under a sky that still doesn't quite know what happened. The dolphins trail behind like an honor guard, splashing and spinning. You ride in silence for a while, but your mind's already moving ahead. There's a mountain waiting for you, a cave, and a girl with stars in her eyes and abandonment in her past. But we'll get to Ariadne later. For now, you let the salt wind tousle your curls. You watch the dolphins. One of them looks up at you, dark eyes, intelligent, almost embarrassed. Maybe he remembers. Maybe not. Either way, you nod. A small mercy, given late, but given. Acoet stares ahead, stunned into a kind of sacred quiet. You wonder what he'll do after this. If he'll tell the story. If anyone will believe him. Spoiler, they won't. At least, not the way it happened. But stories like this don't need belief to survive. They just need to be told. You've always been drawn to the edges. Not just of maps, but of understanding, those blurry lines where belief begins to shiver and slip, where people lower their voices and light candles instead of torches. And now, beyond the Roman roads and beyond even the reach of Liberalia parades, lies a place that doesn't even have your name in its vocabulary. Not yet. Gaul, Hispania, the cold green fingers of Britannia. And further, across waters restless as Maenads mid-revel, there's a dream of something even newer. Something raw. A world on the cusp of itself. The western provinces are still Romanish, but they're different. Less marble, more mud. Less epic poetry, more oral storytelling. Less control, more curiosity. You like curiosity. You arrive unannounced, as always. No grand temple. No trumpet welcome. Just a sudden shift in the wind, a sweeter ripeness in the berries, a hiccup in the tavern laughter that spirals just a little too loud, too unguarded. You're not Dionysus here. You're something else. And yet, they feel you. First, in the vineyards. Because of course, even here, where winters are long and summers suspiciously wet, the grapes still grow. Stubborn, defiant, glorious. People tend them like secrets. And when they drink, well, the stories start. About a spirit in the vines. A god who laughs through the fermentation. Who visits dreams when the moon is full and the barrels are freshly tapped. He offers not just intoxication, but vision. You know this rhythm. This is how it always starts. Mainstream history fact. Archaeological finds show that by the 1st and 2nd centuries CE, Bakshi cults had firmly spread into the western Roman provinces, particularly in Gaul and Iberia. Inscriptions, frescoes, and figurines suggest worship continued even in remote corners, often blending with local beliefs. In one village in Gaul, a carved relief shows a cloaked figure, ivy-wreathed, but riding not a panther, but a local boar. A regional remix. You love it. Some locals confuse you with forest gods or ancient spirits tied to fertility and rain. They light fires, chant songs in languages you've never heard, and pour wine into the soil as offering. You accept. You always do. Quirky tidbit. In parts of rural Gaul, local celebrations of grape harvests evolved into hybrid festivals. Roman officials tried to reframe them as seasonal observances, but the villagers just kept sneaking in your symbols, ivy, masks, ecstatic music. Even today, remnants of this fusion show up in European wine festivals. You really get around. And still, historians debate whether this provincial version of your cult was truly you, or just a loose interpretation of pleasure deities, mashed up into a kind of divine cocktail. Were they worshipping Dionysus? Or just something Dionysian? You don't mind the question, because you see what's happening. You're evolving. There's a campfire in Britannia, on a damp cliff overlooking a gray sea. A Roman soldier sits with his back to a tree, drinking something sweet and fermented. Next to him, a native girl hums an ancient tune. Neither of them notices you watching, until she looks up, right into your eyes. "You're the one who dances," she whispers. You smile. She gets it. The next morning, she paints symbols on stones, spirals, stars, grapes. She says they're for the dream god, the god who made her mother sing for the first time in years. She doesn't know your name, but she knows you, and that's enough. Across the channel, a different kind of transformation is stirring. Far away, in cities where scrolls are copied and crosses begin to outnumber altars, a new religion is growing, one that doesn't have room for multiple gods, or rituals that involve animal skins and thunderous drumbeats. They begin to call your rites pagan. That word stings. Not because it's ugly, but because of what it means, outsider. You're pushed to the margins. People begin to fear your symbols. Ivy becomes suspicious. Wine becomes sin. Joy becomes temptation. Your followers are mocked. Or worse. But you don't disappear. You just shift. You've always been good at that. In the old bathhouses, songs about you become jokes whispered under breath. In taverns, stories of the wild god still get told after a few too many drinks. You're reimagined in paintings not as a deity, but as a metaphor, decay, revelry, lust, and eventually theft. Still, you endure. In every village festival that gets a little too wild. In every harvest dance that ends in breathless laughter. In every hidden moment when someone sips wine, closes their eyes, and hears music that isn't playing. You're there. One night, in a corner of what will one day be France, a monk writes a letter describing a dream he had. In it, a figure with golden hair and eyes like sunlit wine tells him to laugh more. He burns the letter, but never forgets. You're never gone. Not really. You change shape. Sometimes you're a whispered joke in a monastery. Sometimes a secret sign carved into a wine barrel. And sometimes, just sometimes, you possess an artist's brush hand, making him paint grapes with too much longing, shadows with too much curve. They say history is written by the victors. Maybe, but mythology? That's written in the quiet, unlit corners. And you, my vine-crowned friend, you've always thrived in the dark. So you watch, and wait, because you've heard another whisper floating in from even farther away. A new continent, a new people. They don't know it yet, but they're thirsty. The whisper turns into a breeze. The breeze swells into a current. And soon, you're being carried, not on the back of a panther or in a chariot pulled by satyrs, but in the hold of a creaking wooden ship, somewhere between superstition and ambition. You don't need a ticket. Your stowaway energy, divine contraband, tucked between barrels of port and crates of cassocks. Your name isn't on the manifest, but your presence is unmistakable. You've hitched a ride to the new world. It's not called that yet, not officially, but to the Europeans sailing across this vast and terrifying sea, it might as well be another realm entirely. One part promise, one part punishment, one part fever dream painted in God wants you to conquer colors. And when they step ashore, clutching crosses and muskets and very little humility, guess who slinks in behind them? You do. Of course you do. You always find a way. But this land isn't like the old places. It smells of pine and smoke. The air hangs with stories told in circles, not scrolls. Spirits here don't wear togas. They whisper through animals, through rivers, through dreams that crackle with teeth and flame. You respect that. You don't try to dominate. You observe. And at first, honestly, you're a little lost. The wine here isn't great. The vineyards haven't arrived. And the settlers, Puritans and penitents and profit chasers, aren't exactly in the mood for ecstatic rituals or ecstatic anything, really. These are people who get nervous if someone enjoys dancing too much. Still you wait? Because if there's one thing you've learned from centuries of being worshipped and outlawed and rebranded and nearly forgotten, it's this. Joy always comes back. It takes time. But eventually, the vineyards start to grow. In California, mostly, where the sun kisses everything and the soil remembers its sacred duty. Immigrants arrive with cuttings and knowledge, and slowly, the grapes take root. And where grapes take root, you do too. Mainstream historical fact. The wine industry in California began to flourish in the 19th century, thanks to European settlers, particularly Spanish missionaries and Italian immigrants, who brought viticulture techniques with them. By the mid-1800s, California wine was making its name. You walk among those rows of vines at night, unseen but very much felt. You hum to the soil. You charm the yeast. You whisper inspiration to the vintners when they're unsure of their blends. And more importantly, you find your people again. Because the wine starts flowing. And wherever wine flows, parties happen. And where parties happen, you happen. Quirky tidbit. In early American winemaking, some growers gave their vineyards mythological names, Mount Olympus, Bacchus Cellars, Dionysian vineyards, even if they didn't fully know who you were. They liked the sound. It gave the wine gravitas. Little did they know, they were accidentally invoking the original god of the grape. Of course, America isn't always sure what to do with you. On one hand, it's a nation built on ideas of freedom, expression, indulgence. On the other hand, prohibition. Remember that? 1920 to 1933. 13 years of no alcohol. The nation tried to outlaw one of your core offerings, thinking maybe a little self-denial would make everything cleaner, purer, easier. Spoiler alert, it did not. Instead, you watched people ferment grape juice in their bathtubs, sip bootleg whiskey in secret jazz clubs, and invent an entire era of rebellion just to get close to you again. Historians still argue whether prohibition was a moral crusade gone wrong or a deeply flawed political experiment in social control. Either way, it gave you new ways to sneak in, through flappers' laughter, saxophone wails, whispered speakeasy passwords. You didn't just survive. You thrived. You're always at your best when people try to ban you. And once the Volstead Act was repealed, oh, how you danced. Wine came back. Stronger. Stranger. Redder. And this time, it wasn't just sacrament, it was expression. The bottle became a story. The label a poem. The experience of wine drinking became something layered and sacred again. Dionysian. People didn't always say your name, but they felt you. At art openings, in bohemian cafes, in gatherings where ideas flowed faster than the Merlot. You were there. And not just in the wine. In the freedom. In the unraveling. In the sigh that comes after a sip, when a person forgets how tightly they were holding everything. That's your domain. But something else happens. As the 20th century surges forward, the world gets faster. Louder. Brighter. Machines buzz. Screens flicker. People forget how to sit still. To savor. To lose themselves in the moment. They start trading ecstasy for efficiency. And you? You start to fade. Not completely. You still show up in music festivals. In paintings that ripple with color. In underground parties where bodies sway like seaweed in a storm. But it's harder. People think they don't need gods anymore. They think freedom is a transaction, not a transformation. Still, you don't get bitter. You've seen worse centuries. And besides, you've started to notice something. A shift. The same way you did on the edge of India and Greece and Gaul. You can feel it again. People are hungry. Not just for wine, but for something real. For connection. For mystery. For stories that don't fit on a phone screen. They're starting to look backwards to move forward. And guess what they're finding? You in the mythology books. You in the art museums. You in dusty theater scripts and surprisingly popular TikToks about ancient cults. You in their wine-tasting vocabulary. You in their playlists, even when a beat drops hard and a chorus hits like lightning. You're not just a god. You're a mood. You're a vibe. You're a reminder that joy is sacred, that surrender is holy, that humans were never meant to be spreadsheets, they were meant to feel things. And here, in this new land where your name was almost lost, you rise again. Maybe not on a hilltop altar, but in a backyard where someone opens a bottle and passes it around, laughing under the stars. You hear a toast to whatever makes us feel alive. That's you. That's always been you. It starts quietly. A voice on a podcast talking about the return of the divine feminine, and maybe the divine drunk uncle too. A professor weaving your myths into a lecture on altered states and ritual. A musician strumming a lyre-like riff, half-jokingly calling his band Satyr's Rebellion. Dionysus are everywhere again. But this time, it's not a cult. Not exactly. There are no togas. No censers smoking in marble temples. No Thyrsus spears or wine-filled craters lifted in solemn praise, though one girl on Instagram does decorate her water bottle like a miniature shrine and whispers, "Blessed be Grape Daddy," before she drinks. You let it slide, because this is your renaissance. It's not about returning to what was. It's about showing up in what is. You've always understood something the other gods missed. Humans evolve, but their longing stays the same. They want to belong, to feel joy that bursts the seams of their bodies, to fall out of their heads and into something older than language. And now they need that more than ever. Because the modern world, this pixelated, polished, over-caffeinated carousel, is making them brittle. They're tired of branding their every moment. Tired of squeezing their chaos into captions. They crave messy joy, deep belly laughter, community that doesn't come with a subscription plan. They crave you. Mainstream historical fact. Scholars of mythology and religion have observed a growing Dionysian resurgence in the 21st century, particularly among those exploring neo-paganism, Jungian psychology, and alternative spirituality. Dionysus is increasingly invoked not as a literal deity, but as a symbol of creative freedom, nonconformity, and ritual healing. In the back room of a yoga studio in Portland, someone leads a Dionysian embodiment workshop. No, really. There are drums, loose fabrics, shaky dance moves. A woman cries into her scarf and laughs at the same time. You show up, not to correct them, but to witness. Because whether they call it shadow work, ecstatic release, or trauma-informed revelry, they're brushing right up against your oldest essence. Freedom through surrender, rebirth through breakdown, ritual through chaos. They're not getting it wrong. They're getting it their way. Quirky tidbit: the modern Dionysus trend has spawned everything from online, Menad Monday, memes to grape-themed tarot decks, to a New York drag troupe that stages satirical tragedies in full backsheet costume, complete with LED vines and glitter chalices. In one show, a panther becomes a disco ball. You approve. Of course, not everyone is comfortable with your return. The structured ones. The cautious ones. The algorithm worshippers. They eye your laughter like it's a ticking bomb. Because you don't fit into a 5-year plan. You don't generate KPIs. You don't answer Slack messages. You arrive with bare feet and a knowing grin and say, "Hey, maybe your soul needs to scream tonight." Or kiss a tree. Or lie in the dirt until it feels like a hug. That scares people. But it also liberates them. Historians still argue whether your influence is genuinely spiritual or just a psychological coping mechanism for late-stage capitalism. Whether the modern Dionysian revival is religion, rebellion, or a really intense hobby. You're not here to clarify. You never were. You're the blur between categories. The line that trembles and laughs and disappears altogether. In some circles, you're embraced by LGBTQ+ communities as a patron of fluidity, expression, and chosen family. They call on you during drag balls and moonlit protests, in spaces that shimmer with freedom and found love. You show up every time. No judgment, no hierarchy, just joy. Because that's the thing, you've never cared what name they use. You never needed incense or hymns. You've always been most at home where boundaries dissolve. And now you live in a film student's wild midnight edit, spliced with spirals and shrieks. A pop-up wine ritual in Berlin with strangers dancing on crates. A 13-year-old's first taste of theater, when the mask goes on and they become someone else. These moments, fleeting, intense, irrational, are your altars. No bricks required. You walk through cities without being seen, trailing a scent of rosemary, rain, and Pinot Noir. The scent of something just about to tip over. You sit in back rows of improv shows. You ride night buses where laughter suddenly explodes, contagious and unexplainable. You are unlicensed therapy, unrehearsed ceremony, unapologetic weirdness. You're, in a word, bet. But here's the twist, you've changed. You're not just the party god anymore. Not just the grape guy or the chaos king. You've matured, like a bottle left undisturbed in a deep, dark cellar. Now you're also the god of boundaries being respected, of rest being revered, of laughter that comes after the storm and not during it. You show up to say, it's okay not to know. It's okay not to hold it together. It's okay to feel too much and make art from it anyway. In this new chapter, you're part therapist, part trickster, part DJ. You don't demand worship. You invite reunion. Not just with wine. With the self. The real self. The untamed self. The one beneath the email signature and the dental plan and the calendar alerts. You've always known they were in there. You just waited for them to remember. And when they do, you're there. Barefoot, radiant, wild-eyed, arms open. Saying, welcome back. Now let's dance. You're standing on the deck of a quiet boat again. Not the pirate ship from all those centuries ago, but something softer, slower, almost like a memory with a rudder. The night stretches around you, velvet and still. Stars blink lazily overhead. Water laps the hull like it's keeping time with a heartbeat you nearly forgot was yours. You close your eyes. You breathe. And for once, Dionysus, yes, you're not leading a dance. Not crashing a party. Not turning enemies into marine mammals or letting ivy riot through city walls. You're just present. Because tonight, there's nothing to prove. Nothing to reclaim. No disguise to wear. You've spent millennia shape-shifting, God, grape, madness, muse. But under all those masks, there's always been the same pulse. The same whisper in the soul that says, more. Feel more. Risk more. Break and bloom and taste what's true. Tonight you let that voice rest. Because your story, this long, looping, luscious tale of defiance and delight, it's come full circle. Not to end. Just to breathe. Mainstream historical fact. Dionysus is the only Olympian god said to have died and been reborn. Some versions of the myth have him torn apart by titans and later reassembled, a symbol of the cycle of destruction and renewal that shaped how ancient Greeks understood existence itself. And that's the key, isn't it? You're not the god of chaos. You're the god of what comes after. After the breakdown. After the silence. After the scream, the sob, the surrender. What you really offer isn't just madness or wine or transformation. It's permission to unravel, to reassemble, to live with the volume turned up again. Historians still argue whether your myth was ever meant to be literal, whether the pirate to dolphin tale was just metaphor or a warning or some theatrical inside joke lost to time. But they miss the point. It doesn't matter if it happened. It matters that it still happens. Every time someone breaks free of their shell. Every time a quiet kid joins a drum circle and finds their roar. Every time someone lets themselves grieve, then laugh in the same breath. You're there. You were always meant to be the god of the real, hidden inside the unreal. And in this moment, this hushed, starlit moment, your greatest act isn't turning pirates into dolphins. It's turning silence into sanctuary, stillness into solace, myth into memory. You rest your hands on the railing. Below, dolphins surface. Dolphins. Because, let's face it, they did become dolphins. Maybe not those exact pirates, maybe not in some myth-busting National Geographic way, but in the only way that counts. They were changed. They were reckless, cruel, greedy, until they met something they couldn't understand. And instead of being destroyed, they became part of it. Part of the sea. Part of the story. Part of you. And that's what you've always done. You don't destroy. You transform. With laughter. With music. With wine. With terror, sometimes, yes, but always followed by the tender hand of release. That's why you're still here. That's why your name still circles whispered lips. Not because you were the wildest, but because you were the most forgiving. You look out over the water. The dolphins arc like commas in an unfinished sentence. The sea hums. The stars blink. You feel the weight of every offering ever made in your name, every grape crushed, every song shouted, every dance that ended in joyful collapse. And you smile. Not a trickster's smirk. Not a rebel's grin. Something older. Softer. Like gratitude wearing sandals. This is the part of the myth most people miss. The after. The calm that follows the ecstasy. The peace that grows in the soil the chaos cleared. You've earned it. They've earned it. So tonight, you offer not a lesson, but a blessing. Not turn or be turned, but let go. Come home. Feel everything. And now, we sleep. The deck fades beneath you. The stars blur like watercolor on old parchment. Somewhere far away, laughter trickles down a hill, soft and slurred, like a lullaby from another lifetime. Your breath slows. You're safe. You're warm. The night wraps around you like a woolen myth, ancient, comforting, woven with the threads of every story you've just traveled through. The scent of crushed grape skins, wild thyme, and rain-kissed earth drifts through the air. You're not a god anymore. You're not a listener. You're just drifting. No need to remember every detail. No need to carry it all. Let the dolphins keep the ending. Let the ocean hold your name. The world outside the story can wait. Right now, you exist only in softness. Feel how heavy your limbs have become, like vines after harvest. Let your fingers unfurl. Let your thoughts wander, then slow, then fade into a gentle hum. The kind that plays in your mind when everything is finally, blissfully still. No more transformation. No more questions. Only quiet. Only rest. And if, by morning, you forget the pirates or the panthers or the glint of stars on god tiers, that's okay. What matters is how you feel now. Released. Free. So close your eyes, traveler. Let Dionysus keep watch. You're not alone in the dark. You never were.